Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today we have some very important news out of the state of Iowa. I'm recording this just a few minutes after this news has broken, which is that Republican Congresswoman Ashley Hinson has officially gotten the endorsement of President Donald Trump. Trump released a Truth Social statement where he said, "Congresswoman Ashley Hinson is running for the United States Senate in Iowa, a state I love and won big 3 times in 2016, 2020, and 2024. Trump said, "I know Ashley well, and she is a winner. A loving wife and proud mother of 2 sons, Ashley is a wonderful person, has always delivered for Iowa, and will continue doing so in the United States Senate. She is working hard to create jobs, cut taxes, promote products and services made in America by our incredible Iowa workers, support our great farmers and American agriculture, champion innovation, continue to help secure our now very secure southern border, stop migrant crime, murderers, and other criminals from illegally entering our country, strengthen our military, veterans, and defend our always under siege Second Amendment. Ashley Hinson will be an outstanding senator and has my complete and total endorsement. She will not let you down." This is obviously very big news for the 2026 Iowa Senate race, where this Senate seat is currently held by Republican Senator Joni Ernst, who just a few days ago announced she would not be running for re-election. Now, with Ashley Hinson in this race, she officially has the endorsement of President Donald Trump. The Wikipedia page has not yet been updated, but she officially has the endorsement of President Trump. And this is very significant because for a while now I've been saying Ashley Hinson is the likely Republican Senate nominee. The only thing that may stop her from getting it would be if President Trump decided to announce an endorsement for another Republican, like maybe Brenna Byrd or Matthew Whitaker if they decided to run. Now President Trump throwing his endorsement behind Ashley Hinson and her starting out as the leading Republican candidate essentially ends the Republican primary. There probably still will be 1 or 2 other Republicans like Jim Carlin or Joshua Smith that may stay in the race, but Ashley Hinson is going to win this Republican primary and be the Republican candidate to go into the general election. Now, on the Democratic side, things are still pretty wide open. Democrat Bob Kraus is running, Jackie Norris, another Democrat, is running, as well as Nathan Sage, Josh Turek, and Zach Walz. All of them relatively are pretty much the same level of Democrat. Neither one of them really brings a unique election ability that can make this race super competitive in the same way even Democrat Rob Sand in Iowa is doing for the governor's race. But this is a very interesting development in the fact that this gives some clarity on the Republican side of things, where Republicans and President Trump have already quickly united around Republican Ashley Hinson to be the Republican Senate candidate. As for the general election, Iowa is currently listed as likely Republican from Inside Elections, Cook Politico, and Sabotage Crystal Ball. Race to the White House has it listed as lean for the Republicans. Now, first, when you look at the recent election results in the state of Iowa, President Trump just won the state by 13.2% in 2024, 8.2% in 2020, and 2016 by 9.4%, all likely for the Republicans. In 2022, longtime Senator Chuck Grassley won by 12.2% in the state of Iowa. Now, in 2020, Joni Ernst's Senate seat was a little bit more competitive than this. Here, she won by 6.5% in the Senate race against the Democrat Teresa Greenfield. Back in 2016, the Senate race before that, Chuck Grassley won by 24.4%. Ernst won in 2014 by 8.3%. So it seems that Joni Ernst, despite winning 2 elections now in likely Republican categories or likely Republican margins, she was the more vulnerable of the 2 Iowa senators to a potential competitive general election. Now, Ashley Hinson, for her situation here, in the 2nd Congressional District, which according to the Cook PVI is only a Republican +4 district. So it is lean for the Republicans, but not by a very huge margin. She won it by 15.6% in 2024, a very large win. In 2022, she won it by 8.2%. So both elections showed Hinson's strong ability to win this district by more so than what the generic level was based on the election history of this. So if that translates to the general election, any chance the Democrats had at winning the Iowa Senate race for 2026, I think is pretty much gone now. Where when you look at the 2026 Senate map in the state of Iowa, or in the Senate map, obviously Democrats would love to win the state of Iowa and add it to their column, but right now I think Republicans start out as the favorites in the likely Republican category without really too much of a debate there. It could be one the Democrats look to have some polls come out showing a closer race, but with the endorsement of President Trump and the recent election history of the state of Iowa being a pretty reliable, likely Republican state, I think we see Ashley Hinson become the Republican candidate and hold on and win this Iowa Senate race, keeping it red for another 6 years. And overall, Iowa plays a pretty significant role in the 2026 Senate map. I currently have 4 Senate seats listed as toss-up: Michigan, North Carolina, Georgia, and Maine, as well as some close races as well in Ohio and New Hampshire. If Iowa were to become a toss-up state, the Republicans would no longer have a 51 Senate seat majority. It would then be 50 guaranteed for the Republicans, where Vice President Vance would have to break every single tie Senate vote if the Democrats are able to win all the other seats, including the state of Iowa. So Iowa does play an important role as kind of like a safety net for the Republicans in the 2026 Senate map, especially considering if the Democrats with Sherrod Brown in Ohio are able to put Ohio in play, even more so than it already is. Iowa would keep, based on everything else on the map, would keep the Republicans at around 50 seats. If Iowa would become competitive as well, that would put the Republicans down to 49. The Democrats would then have a mathematical chance at winning the Senate, though a lot would have to go wrong for the GOP for that to happen. But Iowa right now plays a very important role, and with this news of Ashley Hinson essentially having the Republican primary now on lock with the endorsement from President Trump, I think we're going to see Hinson go on, win this primary, and be the next senator from the state of Iowa. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe. If you did, leave a comment below. Tell me your thoughts on this video and anything you'd like to leave. Do all that down below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you in a future video. Hello everyone, and welcome to today's video. Today we're talking about the 2028 presidential election, and specifically looking at the state of New Hampshire, where local news station WMUR's political director Adam Sexton has released some screenshots of a new poll released from St. Anselm College of a new poll of the 2028 race. And it shows that Democrat Pete Buttigieg is tied with California Governor Gavin Newsom at 23% to 23% in the New Hampshire primary for 2028, with J.B. Pritzker finishing in third at 9%. Sexton also opposed other candidates as well, potentially, with Bernie Sanders getting 4%, Amy Klobuchar getting 3%, Josh Shapiro getting 3%, Gretchen Whitmer getting 2%, and another candidate getting 3%. There is also, I believe, I did skip the second slide because I did not expand it, but the second slide showed Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez at 7%, Kamala Harris at 6%, and Cory Booker at 5%. So this is obviously very big news, as New Hampshire is historically one of the earliest states to hold its presidential primaries. New Hampshire's had a history of being the first presidential primary for the presidential elections. Now for 2024, that did change after Joe Biden and many of his closest allies moved it away from New Hampshire to, I believe, South Carolina, a state Joe Biden won in the Democratic primary in 2020. It's still very much up in the air for what's going to happen for 2028 if the Democrats move it to being New Hampshire again. But whether it is or not on the Democratic side, New Hampshire plays a very important role in the 2028 Democratic presidential primary, and historically is known as a state that essentially picks presidents in terms of primaries like this one. And with Buttigieg and Newsom tied at 23-23, it shows what's starting to become very apparent from the 2028 presidential polling, which is this is going to become a very tight race on the Democratic side, a very competitive one, which Gavin Newsom is quickly gaining in a lot frequently now. The New Hampshire polling by St. Anselm right now, this is the only poll taken for New Hampshire, but shows a close race. For North Carolina from back in July, it showed Buttigieg in first there, with Harris in second place and Newsom in third. Now for Ohio, in the Emerson poll, it showed Gavin Newsom winning the state of Ohio, with Pete Buttigieg in second place at 15.3. Texas, from back in earlier August, Pete Buttigieg finished first with 21.6, and Newsom in second with 19.5. So the national polls in Florida, the only state I haven't mentioned, showed Buttigieg in first with 23, and Newsom around 12% from back in June. So the national polls, we've seen an update here, and obviously Gavin Newsom's really in California. The national polls have shown a competitive race where Gavin Newsom has been surging in support and is now even in second or even first place, depending on the poll you're looking at and the polling average. So Newsom has certainly been surging. But now we see in the First in the Nation poll as well that Buttigieg and Newsom are tied. Now, this is very important to mention because back in 2020, Pete Buttigieg had a lot of grassroots support in the state of New Hampshire and essentially had a surging campaign in Iowa and New Hampshire, the two first contests from 2020. So Buttigieg starting out in first place or tied for first place in New Hampshire for 2028 really does not come as much of a surprise for me. I kind of expect that he will after his strong showing from 2020. But Gavin Newsom starting out at 23% is very significant, and I think plays into the overall greater trend for the Democrats for 2028 right now, which is that Democrats, the primary is wide open. They're looking for someone that's going to fight not only for the Democrats, but fight against President Trump. And Gavin Newsom, for the last month or so, has been very vocal on social media and on TV, going after President Trump and the Trump administration, and that seems to be rewarding him in these early Democratic polls. Where a state like New Hampshire, almost about as far away you can get geographically from a state like California, Newsom is now tied for first place with Buttigieg. Now, there's still 12% undecided, and obviously we're in the fall of 2025. Going to be a long time before the Democratic primaries for 2028 take place. But it's interesting to see this poll out of New Hampshire, out of the Granite State, that confirms the national trends, which is that Gavin Newsom is surging in a lot of these polls. It's also significant to show that Vice President Kamala Harris, who just back in November won the state of New Hampshire over Donald Trump by about 3 points, is polling in fourth place at 6% of the vote. So nationally, as we see in the polling aggregates, Kamala Harris still barely leading the race to the White House average at 19%. In the most recent Yahoo YouGov poll, she's at 19%. We're starting to see her numbers slowly slip away as more time goes on. In a state like New Hampshire, it shows her numbers have fallen a lot further, down to 6%. Whereas in other states, like back in July, she's still polling in the top 3 in North Carolina. Ohio, she's polling around that 6% margin. In Texas, she's polling in the top 3 as well. So it's very interesting to see what overall is going on. As for the general election polls, there haven't been too many so far, but one from YouGov and Yahoo showed Newsom leading J.D. Vance 49-41 in the hypothetical matchup. Another from Ledger 360, which is a pollster I'm not too familiar with, to be completely honest, has Newsom leading Rubio 49-44 and 47-46 over J.D. Vance. So that's 2 polls in a row now that show Gavin Newsom narrowly ahead of J.D. Vance, or ahead by a decent amount in the YouGov Yahoo poll, while the rest of them thus far have shown J.D. Vance leading over Gavin Newsom. So again, there's not really too much to react or overreact to here, as we're still very early on in the process of 2028. President Trump just won in 2024. We're in August or September now of 2025. But we're starting to see some interesting developments in this 2028 Democratic primary, which is that Gavin Newsom has been surging nationwide, and in the first primary in caucus states like New Hampshire and maybe potentially in Iowa, we're starting to see Gavin Newsom start to surge there as well. As for the overall New Hampshire presidential primary, this is going to be a very interesting one to watch when it does happen, as Pete Buttigieg does have a lot of support here, and this should be one of his strongest states in terms of the presidential primary, that in Iowa. So if Buttigieg loses New Hampshire to Newsom in 2028, that could potentially be a sign that Pete Buttigieg is in for a much tougher fight, and Newsom may be winning this 2028 Democratic primary. But again, very early on, don't want to get ahead of myself or ahead of the process or anything for 2028, but this poll is very interesting in showing that Gavin Newsom, at very least, is now tied for the Democrats in the Granite State in New Hampshire for the 2028 presidential primary. And in that St. Anselm poll, it also had some other polls as well from local races in New Hampshire, like the congressional districts, and I do believe the Senate race as well. I'll be doing other videos on that probably in the future, but for this video, this is what came out of the 2028 presidential race. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe. If you did, leave a comment below. Tell me your thoughts. I hope to see you in a future video. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's video. So just a few days ago, I did a video talking about the 2026 governor's elections and what I viewed as the Democrats' best case scenario for that map. Today, as I promised, this video is going to be the best case scenario for what the Republicans could do in 2026. So we have a lot of races to go over. Let's get right into it. First, I'm going to start with the races I expect will not be very competitive and will be more than 15-point Republican wins. These are going to be governor's races in Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, South Carolina, and Florida. I expect all these will be by more than 15% of the vote. And after Florida has trended so far to the right under Ron DeSantis, I expect it will likely continue, especially in the Republicans' best case scenario. So that gets the Republicans essentially a floor of 10 governor's races really right away, no matter what. Now, I think there are a few number of seats that I think are also going to be safe for the Democrats, really, no matter what, as well. I think we see California go in the safe column for the Democrats. Hawaii goes safe for the Democrats. I think we see Massachusetts and Rhode Island go safe. And I think we see Westmore and Maryland potentially win by a safe margin as well. The only thing that would change Maryland would be if Larry Hogan, the former governor, runs against him. But for now, I think we see that go safe for the Democrats. So that gets the Republicans at 10, Democrats are at 5. Now we start to go into the races that I think are essentially safe for both respective parties, but could be a little bit be under that 15% margin. And the first one of these for the Republicans to talk about, I think, is the state of Texas with Republican Governor Greg Abbott. Greg Abbott won back in, I believe it was 2022, at the governor level here. He won by around 11 points. So I think in the Republicans' best case scenario, we see Texas relatively be similar to 2022, maybe a little bit better. 2026 will be a more Democratic expected wave year, but I think Republicans could hold on to Texas by over double digits in the governor's race in 2026. So that would be a likely Republican win. The next one that could be a likely Republican win in the GOP's best case scenario would be the state of Alaska. This is a race that could potentially become competitive, but with Mike Dunleavy being term limited, but after he won by 26 points, even with the open race with Democrats are feeling very optimistic, in this race, I think Republicans win here by a pretty reliable margin, but I do think it'll be under 15 points since it is an open race. And Alaska, the governor level, has shown some very interesting abilities to be competitive races here. The next one that I think would be in the likely column would actually be the state of New Hampshire with Republican Governor Kelly Ayotte, who just won in 2024 for the first time as governor of New Hampshire by 9.3%. For 2026, in the best case scenario, we probably see her get close to breaking 15%, but win by about 12 to 13 points or so, still in the likely category. That would put the Republicans up to 13. The next seat that I think is most likely at this point would be the state of Ohio. Ohio Republican Vivek Ramaswamy, the 2024 presidential candidate, will be facing off against either Democrat Amy Acton or former U.S. Representative Tim Ryan. Now, Ohio, back in 2022, voted for Mike DeWine by 25 points at the governor level, though back in 2018 it was a close race, only 3.7%. But Ohio, we've seen, has been a consistent, likely Republican state for President Trump in all three of his presidential elections, winning it by 11 points in 2024. I think we see Vivek win Ohio by a likely Republican margin for 2026 in the GOP's best case scenario. Another one to talk about is the state of Vermont. Vermont right now would be a safe Republican state. The question is just going to be, does Republican Phil Scott run for re-election again? He's a very liberal Republican, but he is someone that keeps getting elected by large margins in New England. If he runs again, I think he'll win by a safe margin. So in the GOP's best case scenario, that would involve Phil Scott running again for this race. The next one that would go into the likely Republican category, I actually think would start with the state of Kansas, where this is currently held by Democratic Governor Laura Kelly. Now, she won two very close elections in 2022 and 2018, but the state of Kansas voted for Donald Trump at the presidential level by 16 points in 2024. But seeing as it is a Democratic governor that is term limited, it'll be an open race, and it is a contentious primary underway on the Republican side. I think the GOP will win it by under 15 points in their best case scenario, but they will flip the seat from blue to red in the 2026 cycle. The next state that I think would be the most likely Republican win would be the state of Iowa. Iowa, this is Republican Governor Kim Reynolds. She is term limited and cannot seek, or she could seek a third term, but is choosing not to. This is an open race, but one that the Republicans, in their best case scenario, should be winning by more than 5 points, but under 15 points. Now, it is worth noting that Democrats are running Rob Sand, the only statewide elected Democrat right now, and he is someone that is a strong candidate and is giving Democrats a lot of optimism. But based on Iowa's voting history, at the governor level, a 18.5% win in 2022 and a 13-point for Trump in 2024, the Republicans should be at least winning this state by more than 5 points in their best case scenario in 2026. Now, that's probably going to be it for sure likely Republican wins. There are a few more that I think could be likely Republican, but for now, I'm going to put there. Now we have some states that I think fall into the likely Democratic category. These are going to be states that are going to be in between 5 and 15% for Democrats that Republicans may like to contest, but I think are probably going to be a little bit out of reach. The first one's going to be Colorado, with Democrat Jared Polis being term limited and U.S. Senator Michael Bennet is the favorite to become the Democratic nominee there. I think we could see it be under 15 points, but I don't think the Republicans are going to have much of a chance in that governor's race. Illinois with J.B. Pritzker, I also think, is going to be a similar situation. For the Republicans' best case scenario, Illinois did once upon a time elect a Republican governor. You have to go back to 2014 for that in the Republican wave year. But I think we're a far way away from how that ended up going, and I think we're going to see Illinois still remain in the Democratic column by the likely margin for 2026. Now, the state of Oregon with Tina Kotek was pretty competitive back in 2022. She only won by 3.4%, but a third-party candidate split about 8.5% of the vote. Unless something changes in regards to Oregon, I think we probably see it be in the likely Democratic margin for the Republicans' best-case scenario. I don't think we're going to see it in a realistic sense going towards the GOP. Now we move into New England, where I think the state of Connecticut, though it has had some potential in recent elections, it voted 12.9% in 2022 for the Democrat. Back in 2018, the Democrat Lamont only won by 3.2%. Back in 2014, the race was actually pretty competitive at 2.6%. But I think given how the state has trended in recent years, we'll probably see Connecticut go in the likely Democratic category. Maine, I'm actually not going to do yet. I'm going to come back to, because I think there's a little bit of a hidden story developing in the state of Maine that I do want to talk about more in depth. Now, these are all the states that I think for sure would go in the Democratic, or would go for sure the Democratic category, except for one in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, Republican Stacey Garrity is running against Democrat Josh Shapiro, and Garrity is a much better Republican candidate than Doug Mastriano was from 2022. But given Shapiro's approval ratings, I think we're going to see Pennsylvania remain in the likely Democratic category. But could Garrity get it around 5.5 to 6 points and essentially save the Republicans down ballot in the House races? That could play a very important role for 2026. I think Pennsylvania overall, though, as we've seen it become a very competitive state at the presidential level, this one's more about Josh Shapiro being a very strong candidate than it is about Pennsylvania being out of reach for the GOP. At the governor level, I think it's more of a Josh Shapiro being very good situation. Now we have some states that certainly are more on the likely Democratic side, but in the Republicans' best case scenario, could potentially go for the GOP, but probably won't. First one is the state of Minnesota with Democratic Governor Tim Walz. Tim Walz won this election back in 2022 by 7.7%, but we did see the president lose to Kamala Harris by 4.2% in the state in 2024 with Walz as the running mate on the ticket. So it is possible that we could see the Republicans make a little bit of inroads here in their best case scenario, but we still probably will see Minnesota go for the Democrats. Now we have the state of New Mexico, where Republicans, I'm sure, would love to make the state competitive, but we saw the state go for Kamala Harris by 6 points in 2024. We also saw the governor's race in 2022 go about 6.4% for the Democrat Grisham. In the GOP's best case scenario, I think we see New Mexico fall under 5%, but I think we also, like with Minnesota, see the Democratic identities a little too strong and the Democrats end up winning that state. Now, the last one of this, or actually maybe not the last one, but the state of New York could be very interesting because New York voted for Kathy Hochul by only 6.4% in 2022. And this may essentially be the best the Republicans could do in the state, seeing as it was a Republican midterm year. The presidential race, a 12.6% win for Kamala Harris, though it was a little bit closer. Could there be a scenario in 2022 where Kathy Hochul faces off against Elise Stefanik and the Republican Stefanik's able to get this race under 5 points in the state of New York? It's a little bit hard to imagine, but it is at very least in the GOP's best case scenario where everything goes right for them, it is a little bit possible. If Hochul's approval ratings were so bad, it was like a 4.8% win for her, at very least, it is possible. I don't think it will happen in reality, but it could happen. Now we move to the state of Maine. Maine's an interesting state because Maine has not consecutively elected a governor of the same party like 3 terms in a row ever in the state's history, which at very least makes this governor's race very interesting. Another thing I'm watching in the state of Maine right now is that there's a Republican candidate running, or potentially running, in Jonathan Bush, the nephew of former U.S. President George W. Bush, and the Bush family obviously has a very big connection to the state of Maine. And this alone makes the race interesting. It's currently listed as likely Democratic from Cook, Politico, and Inside Elections, but Salvador's crystal ball has recently changed this race towards the Republicans in the lean Democratic category. Race the White House has it as tilt Democratic. The idea of Bush running in Maine, given their connections to the state and a wide open Democratic primary between the Secretary of State, President of the Maine Senate, and son of the U.S. Senator Angus King, wide open on the Democratic side, potentially a Bush running in Maine, at very least makes the prospects of this race very interesting. So Maine in the Republicans' best case scenario, I do think it still ultimately goes to the Democrats, but I would not be totally shocked if we're talking about the possibility where the Republicans are outperforming expectations for 2026 if Maine falls under a category of maybe the Republicans are able to pull off a narrow upset in the state of Maine. It's certainly very far-fetched right now as we're talking about 2026 in the governor's map, but in the GOP's best case scenario, all I'm saying is keep a little bit of an eye on Maine. I think it still ends up going Democrat when everything is said and done, but if Jonathan Bush becomes the Republican nominee, he's going to have the backing, obviously, of the Bush family, and that comes with a lot of money to spend in voter outreach, in whether it's TV ads, whether it's knocking on doors, campaign flyers, whatever it is. There's a lot of potential for Bush to make that race a lot closer than a generic Republican possibly could. So all I'm saying is, even in the GOP's best case scenario, keep an eye on Maine. That could be an important one to watch. Now we have 5 governor's races left. All of them were in very competitive states that President Trump did win in the 2024 presidential election. Starting with the state of Nevada, this is Republican Governor Joe Lombardo. He won a very close race in 2022. And in this one against Aaron Ford, the Democratic Attorney General, you have him winning re-election by a little bit over 5% in the GOP's best case scenario. Now, this one could happen. I think this race is going to be very close, under 5 points. But I think in the Republicans' best case scenario, we could see Lombardo holding on to this race and winning it. Next, we have the state of Georgia. This is Governor Brian Kemp, who is term limited. It's an open race. Chris Carr is running against Burt Jones in the Republican primary. The Democratic primary is completely wide open. Brian Kemp just won this race by 7.5% in 2022. I don't think we see the Republicans win it by quite that much, even in their best case scenario, but I do think Republicans could hold on to this race by a little bit under 5 points, around 4.5% or so in their best case scenario. Certainly I could see Georgia going red. So at this point, the Republicans have held every seat they currently hold on the governor's side and flipped the states of Kansas. But now we have some other pickup opportunities in Arizona, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Starting with Arizona. Arizona currently is the closest governor's race in the country that I am watching right now. This is Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs. She very barely got elected against Carrie Lake in 2022. Andy Biggs and Karen Taylor Robson are both running in this Republican primary. The early polling has shown Katie Hobbs will lead of about 2 to 3 points over Biggs and Karen Taylor Robson in these early polling, with a lot of undecided vote left. After such a narrow victory of 0.67% in 2022, and President Trump winning the state by 5.5% in 2024, in the GOP's best case scenario, I think we could see the Republicans winning by under 5 points, but more than 1 point in this race, giving it to the GOP. That would put the Republicans up at 20 governor seats. Now we have the states of Wisconsin and Michigan, 2 states that very narrowly voted for President Trump. Oh, that's the 28 map, for President Trump in 2024, Wisconsin and Michigan by 1.4 in 2024 at the presidential level. Down ballot at the Senate level, things have been a little bit less good for the Republicans in Wisconsin and Michigan, and at the governor level, it's been even worse. In 22, Gretchen Whitmer won by 10.5%. 2022, Evers won by 3.4%. Now, the good news for the GOP in these 2 states is both Evers and Whitmer are not running again. They are both, in Whitmer's case, term limited, or in Evers' case, deciding to seek a 3rd term, decided against it. So this race is open. Now, Wisconsin's going to be very close. Lots of Democrats could be running for the Democratic nomination. Republican U.S. Representative Tom Tiffany is the top name to potentially run for governor at this current point in time. Michigan is a special case, as the independent Mayor Mike Duggan of Detroit is running for governor and getting a very large percent of the vote. So John James, the Republican, running for the Republicans in Michigan against Democrat Jocelyn Benson against independent Mike Duggan, is going to make a very close race with a lot of third-party vote, causing some potential splitting of the vote. When everything is said and done, I think we could see a very potential scenario here where we see Wisconsin and Michigan both very narrowly go for the GOP in their best case scenario. I do have it under 1 point because I do think that's what it would take to win those elections, but I do think the Republicans, when everything is said and done, could flip these 2 governor seats to their side. So right now, the Republicans' best case scenario, I have them winning 22 governor's races to the Democrats' 14. Now, there are some close races that I think the Republicans could try and target in their best case scenario, like New Mexico, like Minnesota, like New York, and in Maine, like I mentioned, as a potential sleeper. But I think when everything is said and done, the Democratic identity of those states is just a bit too strong that I think the Democrats still win those races. Though Maine especially, I am keeping a little bit of an eye on. But Republicans, I think in their best case scenario, would be able to get at least around 22 governor's races to the Democrats' 14. Because again, I am trying to keep it realistic. I'm not trying to say the Republicans will win every governor's race. I want to make it realistic and actually think that it could happen. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure and like and subscribe. If you did, leave a comment below. Tell me your thoughts on this video and any other comments or suggestions you would like to leave. Leave them all down in the comment section. Again, if you enjoyed, make sure to hit like and subscribe as well so you never miss when I post a new video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you in a future video.